I'm Kristen Levine, your host for Pet Food Forum TV, and joining me right now is Dr. Maria Godoy, Assistant Professor at the University of Illinois in the Animal Sciences Department.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Absolutely. So let's start off by explaining to us what comparative nutrition means.
Sure. So comparative nutrition means, for example, when you have a species of emphasis, so in my case, dogs and cats, you may use other animal models to take a further look about the benefit of nutrition for the health of these animals. So for example, in my case, I use the rooster model as well as the swine model because we have more tools to, for example, learn about amino acid digestibility and other things, and they're not so easily to be done in dogs and cats. And so we use them as a model. We can also use rodents, and nowadays we can even leverage data from humans because we're so alike, and so even humans can become a model for dogs and cats.
Interesting.
I know.
Oh, that's great. So I know you're also an expert in nutraceuticals. So can you explain what a nutraceutical ingredient means?
Yes. So a nutraceutical would be an ingredient that you add in a food or a diet matrix that besides providing a nutritional purpose, so for example, a protein source, a fat source, would also add a health benefit. So a great example would be fish oil, right? So fish oil, it's an oil source, a fat source, but also comes with a lot of those good omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, the DHA and EPA, which are very hard to pronounce,
right.
but docosahexaenoic acid. And they provide like the anti-inflammatory properties. And so that would be a great example. So the idea of a nutraceutical would be a step further nutrition towards the health and wellness of pets, humans, whatever species you have in mind.
And is that a significant trend now that more and more pet food manufacturers are wanting to incorporate nutraceuticals into their diets?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you look at the wants and needs of these pet parents, right? Now we look at the dogs and cats as our four-legged children, and they're really concerned about longevity, well-being, mitigating diseases because our pets are also living longer. So adding those nutraceuticals can really help on all those spectrums. And so, for example, a lot of the therapeutical diets, a lot of the diets even that are over the counter, they have a lot of claims and they're using a lot of different ingredients and nutrients that can add that benefit to the pet.
Okay. Now you mentioned mitigating disease. I think we tend to think of nutraceuticals as being preventative for our health, but are there also can it also impact clinical conditions?
Yes. So for example, if you think about the veterinary prescription diets, so for example, the diets for joint health, it may be that you have an animal that suffers from osteoarthritis. And so usually what we see is a bit more concentrated levels, if you will, of those particular nutraceuticals. And they're not there for to cure or to substitute any kind of veterinary care. They're really there to kind of support that animal. And so it's kind of that when you take a supplement, you don't go away from going to the doctor, right? So they're there to balance each other.
Okay. Let's shift gears a little bit now. You did an online survey recently. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was really exciting. We conducted a research using 4 different languages, so English, Portuguese, French, and Spanish. And we did that because, well, some of us developing the survey, we speak a first language, and English is a second language for us. So I'm from Brazil, so my first language is Portuguese. But also because these languages, they are very representative of the majority of the pet food market. So it was very actually targeted for the current pet food industry. So we received over 4,000 responses, even though 64% was from English responders. So there is a little limitation, especially when you think about the Spanish survey, because we had a lower response. But nonetheless, we learned a lot of things from them. So we learned that there are differences in gender. So females were 90% of our responses, but they were also more likely to be concerned about health diet for themselves and for their pets, whereas the men were more likely to say they were not concerned about health eating habits for themselves and more prevalent for their pets. So I think there is something to learn in there. We also learned that pet owners, most of them score their pets at having an ideal body condition score, which goes against the current statistics and the prevalence of obesity in the pet population, which is very similar to the human. So I think that is to say that maybe we need to improve a little bit the education and the tools and increase the sensitivity, because if the pet owner doesn't recognize a problem, of course they're not going to do something about it. The other thing that we learned was that supplements, if you as a pet owner are taking supplements, you're more likely to give supplements to your pets, and age has a lot to do with that. So we see, again, this aging population of dogs receiving a greater proportion, and those supplements were like related to problems with joints, inflammation, so the fish oil, glucosamine, chondroitin, a lot of that we saw as well. We saw that online purchasing was really important for US, but not as much for other areas or languages.
How could the survey data be used for pet food companies to shape their strategies?
Well, I think learning the similarities and the differences would be really key, right? So we have a lot of the pet food companies that they are not only in US, but they're also launching different lines across the globe. And so maybe a strategy that would be very effective here may not be in a different country. For example, the protein as a primary ingredient seems to be something very on target here, but wouldn't be in other places. I think the other thing too is that I think we have ignored this small but yet present male pet owner population, and maybe trying to understand what resonates with them. I think the other thing that we have to do is, besides what the pet owner wants, I don't think we should shy away from providing what they want, but we also need to tell them and to educate them that maybe a direct translation is not always valid. So for example, we saw a lot of concerns of providing a low sugar, low sodium diet for pets coming from a health benefit that they see from themselves. And that is not really true for the pet, because there is pretty much no free sugar that are added in most of the pet food, or to not say all. And also sodium is not like a nutrient that is really direct with cardiovascular problems in pets as it is associated with humans. So understanding that there are different nutritional purposes, and we're looking at likely different physiology between humans and dogs and cats would be very important, I believe.
Thank you so much for sharing that information and for joining us today, Dr. Godoy.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. And we'll be back with more right here on Pet Food Forum TV.